Hello out there, everyone. I want to share a little bit of the Word of God with you today. Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a good 2023 and looking forward to a even better 2024. I'd like to share a few things out of the Old Testament today, specifically on the word, the Hebrew word that's translated as hell. This is an interesting subject, and once again, I say this a lot, but if you're a Bible student, you want to make sure that you look at the original words that were translated, look back at the original Hebrew word in the Old Testament or the original Greek word in the New Testament, and spend a little time looking at it, and then look at the context it was written. If you take scriptures out of context, you can end up being guilty of twisting the scriptures and really making the Word of God say something that it's really not saying. So it really does matter what we see in the scriptures and what the scriptures actually say, um, and not just taking for granted that what has been taught for so many years is accurate. And this is a good subject to use as an example of that. So in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word Sheol, Sheol, is translated into the English word grave, pit, and hell. But one thing you have to remember is that it's the same original word, Sheol. It all comes from that one word, and the word means the place of the dead. But in the context that it's written, it's always referring to a literal or figurative grave, or sorry, a literal grave, a figurative grave, or a condition of suffering. One easy place to see this is in the book of Jonah, when Jonah was in the belly of the whale, and he cried out, and the wording is, out of the belly of hell cried I. Well, he wasn't down somewhere in some fiery pit, but he was literally in the belly of a big fish, and he was in a condition where he was suffering for 3 days there because he refused to do the will of God, and he was getting a spanking. So because he was getting a spanking, he was suffering. So that use of the word hell is referring to a condition of suffering that Jonah was in at that time. So that's one example of that use of that word. And then I want to try to just touch on a couple easy scriptures to understand. In Genesis 37:35, this is talking about Jacob. It says, all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And this, of course, is talking about when Jacob thought that Joseph had died because of what Joseph's brothers did to him. And the word Sheol is translated into the word grave. And this is pretty obviously talking about Jacob saying, I'm going to mourn for my son Joseph all the way to the point where I go into my literal grave. When I die, I'm going to go down to the end of my life. But this is the same word that's also translated hell, and it's also translated as pit. But you can see why the translators of the King James Bible use the word grave here. They already had a preconceived idea about the subject, and so they said, well, we can't put the word hell in here because it wouldn't make much sense. So this is pretty obviously talking about a literal grave. And he refers to kind of the same thing all the way down through the book of Genesis, referring to Joseph, referring to Benjamin, Jacob, talking about the literal grave. If you go to Numbers 16 and 30, this is talking about the rebellion of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram when they stood up against Moses and they began to challenge his authority. And he says in the 30th verse of number 16, if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up with all that appertaineth to them, and they go down into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. Now, this same word Sheol is translated as pit, but it's also in other scriptures, it's translated as the word hell. But the meaning doesn't change. This is talking about a figurative grave that when these men rebelled against Moses, God judged them. God opened up the earth. So basically, God dug these men's grave. They didn't go down into some fiery torment somewhere. He opened the earth. These men fell down into this giant cavern, and then the earth closed in upon them. And so the word here is pit. They went down and they died. This is a literal grave. This is what the word means. Let's go down to Deuteronomy 32:22, and I think this is the first time. Let me go back here a little bit. I think I forgot to mention that the word Sheol, maybe I did already mention this. It's translated into the word grave 31 times. This is just Old Testament for now. It's translated as the word hell 31 times, and it's translated as the word pit 3 times. That's Old Testament, so a total of 65 times this word Sheol is used in the Old Testament. So go to Deuteronomy 32:22. This is the first time this word Sheol is translated into the word hell. Now look at what it says. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. So what is this talking about? When Israel, the nation of Israel, would disobey God, they would rebel against him, God would punish them with other Gentile nations that he would allow to come in and either take them captivity or would partially destroy them. He would cause famines and things to come on them. And this word, a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase. When he's talking about consuming the earth with her increase, he's talking about their crops. He's talking about their natural needs, that because of their disobedience, he was going to give them a spanking. And so if you look, this is real easy to see when all you got to do is keep reading. Don't get in your mind anything about the phrase lowest hell, just keep reading. It's not hidden here at all. This was the Lord trying to correct their rebellion and their disobedience. This was a judgment that was called the lowest hell. In verse 23, he says, I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger. How many's been so hungry you felt like you were in hell? You felt like you were going to die if you didn't eat something, if you didn't get a snack. He said, and they'll be devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. I will send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of the dust. You know, this is all things that happened in the Old Testament to the nation of Israel. The sword without, so that means Gentile nations coming in and attacking them, a literal sword. Terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling or the baby, also with the man of gray hairs, the old man. So they were faced with droughts. He didn't bless their crops. They were cursed with enemies coming in and overrunning them. And all these things are labeled as mischiefs. These mischiefs will come upon them. You see that in verse 23. Now remember, the same word is just translated hell here in verse 22. So if you go down, there's another one in Second Samuel. This is talking about David. Some of us hopefully know the David's background and David's story, all the different things that happened to him before he became king, and of course after he became king. It wasn't a picnic then either. 2 Samuel 22:6. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me. Well, now what is this talking about? The sorrows of hell compassed me about. You have to go back. That was 2 Samuel 22:6. When was this happening to David? And why is he saying the sorrows of hell compassed me about? What does he mean by that? If you go back to verse 1 in the same chapter, you just have to read the context that this is written. It says, David spake unto the Lord the words of this song in the day that the Lord had delivered him out of the hand of all his enemies and out of the hand of Saul. So this was the context. This is the situation that David was in. He was running for his life from Saul. Saul was trying to kill him because Saul was jealous. David was anointed king by Samuel. David defeated Goliath. David was getting a name, a reputation. Saul got envious, and Saul went about to kill him, and Saul chased him around for a long period of time. He had a couple hundred men with him. They were, starving, foraging for food. He was responsible for those men. He was, they were running from cave to cave, living in this condition where for maybe even years he was running for his life. And he labeled that as, this is a hellish condition. I've got the sorrows of hell that are compassing me or surrounding me. The snares of death prevented me. Because of the suffering, this was a condition of suffering. The way these words are translated, remember, it's either a literal grave, a figurative grave, or a condition of suffering. And there's some places here that I may do another video on this, but there's some places here in the New Testament that it uses the word grave, or from the original word Sheol, it uses the word grave to talk about a Gentile nation that had swallowed up and taken into captivity the nation of Israel. And he would use a statement like, I'm going to open your grave and let you out. But they weren't in a literal grave. It's figurative speech. He was saying this Gentile nation that is holding you captive or imprisoning you is like a grave to you. And I'm going to open that grave and let you out. After that was my spanking to you. So it's just a few comments on, if you're a Bible student, just encouraging you to look into the Word of God. Don't just read it for the surface value, and don't just buy into what has been said for so many years about some of these different words. Do the work, do the research yourself. Look at these things, and you might be surprised at what you find. All right, God bless you.